In 2004, a team of engineers in Finland built a touchscreen smartphone with internet access. It had a large display. It was internet-ready. It was 3 years ahead of its time. Their company had the technology, the money, and the talent to launch it. Their management said no. 3 years later, Steve Jobs walked on stage and changed the world with the exact same idea. That company was Nokia. And what happened next is not just the story of a phone company that lost, it's the story of a company that invented the future and then chose not to build it. To understand what Nokia lost, you first have to understand what Nokia had. In the year 2000, Nokia was not just the world's largest mobile phone company, it was one of the most admired companies on the planet. Nokia commanded nearly half of the global smartphone market, half of the entire world. In Finland, Nokia was not just a company, it was a national identity. The Finnish government tracked its stock price like a vital sign. Nokia represented 4% of Finland's entire GDP. When Nokia sneezed, Finland caught a cold, and the phones themselves were legendary. The Nokia 3310 was so durable it became a cultural myth. The Nokia 6600 introduced millions of people to mobile internet. The Nokia N95 had GPS, a 5-megapixel camera, and Wi-Fi. In 2006, these were not simple phones. Nokia was genuinely building the future. Their engineers were among the best in the world. One engineer offered 500 proposals to improve their operating system, Symbian, and couldn't get a single one approved. That last sentence tells you everything about what was about to happen. Nokia didn't lose because it lacked talent. Nokia lost because its culture was killing its own ideas. In 2004, inside Nokia's research centers in Espoo, Finland, a team of engineers built something remarkable. A prototype of an internet-ready touchscreen handset with a large display, which they thought could give the company a powerful advantage in the fast-growing smartphone market. This was not a rough sketch. This was a working prototype, demonstrated to business customers, shown to management. The engineers believed it could change everything. Management had a different reaction. They worried that the product could be a costly flop, so they canceled it. Let that sink in for a moment. Nokia had a working touchscreen smartphone in 2004, 3 years before the iPhone, with a team of talented engineers ready to build it, and their management said no. Not because the technology didn't work, not because there was no market, but because they were afraid. Fear that new technology would harm existing products, internal politics, and power struggles. A dangerous belief that their dominance would last forever. The engineers who built that prototype went back to their desks. The prototype went into a drawer, and 3 years later, Apple opened that same drawer. On January 9, 2007, Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco. Every once in a while, he said, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything. He held up the iPhone. It had a large touchscreen display. It was internet-ready. It was everything Nokia had built in 2004 and canceled. Inside Nokia's headquarters in Espoo, executives watched the keynote in real time. Nokia immediately recognized that the iPhone's touchscreen interface and seamless internet integration could redefine the smartphone experience. They called it a game changer. They even outlined exactly what needed to be done to compete. They saw it. They understood it. They wrote internal memos about exactly how to respond. And then, internal fragmentation slowed down decision-making. Nokia debated whether to focus on Symbian or their Linux-based platform called Memo. There were competing priorities, no clear resolution. Meanwhile, Apple was selling iPhones. In 2007, Nokia still had 40% of the global mobile market. They were still the largest phone company in the world. They still had time. But time was the one thing they didn't understand they were running out of. Every month they debated, every committee meeting that ended without a decision, every proposal that died in approval, was a month Apple spent building its ecosystem. "We had the resources and the people," said one Nokia engineer who spent 26 years at the company. "But we didn't do it." 6 words. The entire Nokia story in 6 words. By 2010, Nokia's market share was collapsing. Android had launched, Samsung was growing, Apple was dominant in the high end. Nokia's Symbian operating system, the backbone of every Nokia phone, was visibly dying. In September 2010, Nokia appointed a new CEO. His name was Stephen Elop. He was a former Microsoft executive, and within months of taking the job, he wrote one of the most famous internal memos in corporate history. He called it the burning platform. "I have learned that we are standing on a burning platform," he wrote to Nokia's 132,000 employees. "And we have multiple points of scorching heat that are fueling a blazing fire around us." He described a man standing on an oil platform that was on fire. Jump into the freezing water below. Uncertain survival. Stay on the burning platform. Certain death. He chose to jump. In February 2011, Nokia announced a strategic partnership with Microsoft. Going forward, all Nokia smartphones would run Windows Phone, Microsoft's operating system. Symbian was dead. Mego, Nokia's promising next-generation platform that engineers had spent years building, was cancelled overnight. The engineers who had worked on Mego for years learned about the cancellation from the press release. The last phone Nokia built on Mego, the Nokia N9, was released in 2011 as a limited product before the Microsoft transition. It received some of the best reviews Nokia had ever gotten. Critics called it beautiful, fast, and intuitive. Nokia built the right phone, then immediately discontinued it to sell Windows phones. Within 2 years, it was clear the Microsoft partnership wasn't working. Windows Phone had less than 3% market share. Developers weren't building apps for it. Consumers weren't buying it. Nokia had jumped from the burning platform into the wrong ocean. By 2013, it was over. Nokia sold its devices and services division to Microsoft for $7.2 billion. The company that had once been worth 110 billion euros, that had once employed 132,000 people, sold its entire phone business for $7.2 billion. Microsoft bought Nokia believing it could finally compete with Apple and Samsung. It could not. Just 1 year later, Microsoft had to acknowledge the acquisition's shortcomings, recording a staggering $7.6 billion write-off and announcing 7,800 job cuts. Microsoft paid $7.2 billion for Nokia's phone business, then wrote off $7.6 billion. They lost more money on the write-off than they paid for the acquisition. In 2016, Microsoft sold what remained of Nokia to HMD Global for $350 million. From $7.2 billion to $350 million in 2 years. The Nokia brand still exists today. HMD Global still makes phones under the Nokia name. They are sold primarily in developing markets. They have no meaningful presence in the premium smartphone segment. The empire is a ghost. It would be easy to say Nokia lost because Apple was better. But that's not what happened. Apple didn't beat Nokia with superior technology. In 2007, the iPhone couldn't even copy and paste text. It didn't have 3G. It couldn't send MMS messages. Nokia phones in 2007 could do all of those things. Apple beat Nokia with a better operating system, with an app store, with a design philosophy that prioritized the user experience over technical specifications. And Nokia had engineers trying to build exactly those things for years. 500 proposals to improve Symbian, not one approved. One engineer described Nokia's internal culture as Soviet-style bureaucracy, where ideas fell victim to fighting among managers with competing agendas, or were rejected as too costly, risky, or insignificant for a global market leader. The word insignificant is the one that haunts me. Nokia's engineers were trying to build the future. Their management kept calling those ideas insignificant. This is not just a story about phones. This is a story about what happens inside every large, successful organization, when the very success that made them dominant becomes the reason they can't change. Nokia was so good at making the phones of 2000 that they couldn't build the phones of 2010. Their processes, their culture, their incentive structures, all optimized for a world that was disappearing. And the engineers who saw what was coming couldn't get their ideas through a committee. Today, Apple's market capitalization is over $3 trillion. Nokia's phone business was sold for $350 million. The difference between those two numbers is not talent. It's not technology. It's the difference between a culture that says yes to new ideas and one that asks a committee. If this story made you look differently at the company you work for, the decisions being made above you, or the ideas you've stopped pitching, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And next week, we're covering the biggest financial fraud in European history. A company that fooled every regulator, every bank, and every auditor on the continent for a decade. Subscribe so you don't miss it. I'll see you there.